The world is holding its breath. Tension hangs in the air, as uncertainty ripples through every corner of the globe. People everywhere are glued to their screens, waiting for the next update, the next headline, the next sign of what comes next. Today, June 23, 2025, the United States has launched military strikes against what it calls key nuclear facilities inside Iran. The night sky over the Middle East was lit up by explosions, as precision missiles targeted sites believed to be at the heart of Iran's nuclear ambitions. This action has sent shockwaves across the globe, rattling governments and markets alike. Stock markets have plunged, and world leaders are scrambling to respond, convening emergency meetings to assess the rapidly evolving situation. The aftermath is a tangle of accusations, denials, and frantic diplomacy. Officials from every major power are issuing statements, some condemning, others calling for restraint, while behind closed doors negotiations are tense and urgent. This isn't just about two countries, it's about global security, oil prices, and the balance of power. The world's energy markets are on edge, with oil prices spiking and fears of supply disruptions growing by the hour. The US fears Iran is racing toward a nuclear weapon, while Iran insists its program is peaceful. Both sides are locked in a war of words, each accusing the other of deception and aggression. The American strikes have pushed this decades-old conflict to a dangerous new high, raising fears of a wider war. Protests have erupted in cities around the world, and the United Nations Security Council is meeting in emergency session, searching for a way to de-escalate. Into this crisis steps China, issuing a strong condemnation of the US action. Beijing's message is clear. It opposes the use of force and calls for immediate dialogue. As a major power and Iran's economic partner, China's stance adds a new layer of complexity. Its deep ties to Iran, especially in energy and trade, mean that its response could shape the next phase of this crisis. The rivalry between Washington and Beijing is now playing out in the heart of the Middle East. This is not just a regional dispute, but a test of global influence and alliances. We'll break down the reasons behind the US strikes, Iran's nuclear ambitions, and China's response. Understanding these motivations is key to grasping what might happen next. Why is China taking such a firm stand? What are the calculations behind its bold statements and diplomatic maneuvers? What are its interests in Iran and the region? From energy security to expanding its influence, China's stakes in this crisis are higher than ever. The world is watching, and the stakes could not be higher. Every decision, every statement, every move is being analyzed, as ordinary people and leaders alike wonder what the future holds. The decisions made now will shape our world for years to come. In this moment of crisis, the choices of a few will echo across continents, affecting millions and determining the course of history. The recent American strikes on Iran are the culmination of years of rising tensions, failed diplomacy, and a series of confrontations that have pushed both nations to the brink. What we are witnessing is not a sudden escalation, but the result of a long and complicated history between the two countries, marked by mistrust, sanctions, and repeated warnings. US officials claim the operation was a last resort, triggered by intelligence suggesting that Iran was on the verge of achieving a significant nuclear breakthrough. According to American sources, the evidence pointed to activities that could not be ignored, forcing their hand after diplomatic options were exhausted. The strikes specifically targeted key facilities such as Natanz and Fordow, both central to Iran's nuclear ambitions. Advanced bunker-busting munitions were used to penetrate deep underground, aiming to cripple Iran's ability to enrich uranium and develop nuclear technology. The Pentagon insists the operation was limited in scope, carefully planned to focus solely on nuclear infrastructure. Officials emphasize that every precaution was taken to avoid civilian casualties and that the mission was designed to send a clear message without escalating into a broader conflict. Iran, however, sees things very differently. Iranian leaders have condemned the strikes as a blatant act of aggression and a violation of their national sovereignty, rallying public anger and fueling anti-American sentiment across the country. Tehran strongly denies the US intelligence claims, insisting that its nuclear program is entirely for peaceful purposes, such as energy production and medical research. Iranian officials argue that the accusations are politically motivated and lack credible evidence. For many Iranians, the attack is not just a military strike, it is an assault on their national pride, independence, and right to self-determination. The sense of injustice runs deep, uniting people across political divides. Years of painstaking negotiations, including the landmark 2015 nuclear deal known as the JCPOA, once offered hope for a peaceful resolution. But since the US withdrew from the agreement in 2018, trust has eroded, and diplomatic channels have all but collapsed. Multiple attempts to revive diplomacy have failed, leaving both sides entrenched and suspicious. Now, with dialogue replaced by military confrontation, the risk of further escalation looms large. The world is left to wonder what capabilities were destroyed in the strikes, and what the long-term consequences might be. The uncertainty has sent shockwaves through global markets and diplomatic circles alike. This marks a dangerous shift, not just for the Middle East, but for global security as a whole. The potential for wider conflict has never been greater, and the stakes are higher than ever. The breakdown in communication between Washington and Tehran has made the situation more volatile than ever before, with both sides preparing for possible retaliation and further instability. The stakes are now higher, and the risks of escalation are real. Any miscalculation could trigger a much larger conflict, drawing in regional and even global powers. The world is watching anxiously, waiting to see what the next move will be, and hoping that cooler heads will ultimately prevail. Iran's nuclear program has been a source of global concern for decades. Iran claims it needs nuclear power for energy and medical uses, but many suspect military motives. The technology for peaceful nuclear energy can also be used to make weapons. The International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, is tasked with monitoring Iran's activities. Inspectors visit sites, install cameras, and check records to ensure compliance. After the US left the JCPOA, Iran reduced cooperation with the IAEA and increased uranium enrichment. This lack of transparency has fueled US suspicions and was cited as justification for the strikes. The IAEA's limited access means the world can't be sure what's happening inside Iran's nuclear facilities. The crisis has made the nuclear watchdog's job harder than ever. Hours after the US strikes, China's foreign ministry issued a forceful condemnation. Beijing called the attack a violation of Iran's sovereignty and international law. China's message disputes should be resolved through dialogue, not force. By acting without UN approval, the US is, in China's view, setting a dangerous precedent. China urged both sides to show restraint and avoid escalation. Beijing fears a wider conflict would destabilize the region and threaten global economic stability. China positioned itself as a peacemaker, calling for a return to negotiations and the revival of the JCPOA. As a signatory to the nuclear deal, China wants diplomacy, not war. This stance boosts China's image as a supporter of multilateralism and international agreements. It also highlights the growing divide between China's approach and US militarism. China's response is both a rebuke to Washington and a signal of its own global ambitions. The world is taking notice. China's strong reaction to the crisis is deeply rooted in a complex web of its own national interests, both economic and strategic. For Beijing, every move in the Middle East is calculated with long-term consequences in mind. Energy security is absolutely paramount for China. As the world's largest oil importer, China relies heavily on stable and affordable energy supplies to fuel its massive economy. Iran, with its vast reserves, is a crucial supplier, making the relationship between the two countries especially significant. Any conflict in the Middle East, especially one involving Iran, could disrupt vital oil shipments through key choke points, like the Strait of Hormuz. This would likely cause global oil prices to spike, threatening China's economic stability and growth, and potentially leading to domestic unrest. Beyond oil, China has invested billions in the region through its ambitious Belt and Road Initiative. Iran is a major partner in this project, serving as a critical hub for trade routes that connect Asia, Europe, and Africa. War or instability would not only endanger these massive investments, but also threaten the safety of Chinese workers and the future of regional development, undermining years of diplomatic and economic effort. The US-China rivalry is also a major factor. Beijing views American military action in the region as part of a broader strategy to contain China's rise and limit its influence on the global stage. By supporting Iran diplomatically and economically, China is able to challenge US influence in the Middle East without resorting to direct military confrontation, strengthening its own position. There's also a principle at stake. China is a staunch defender of national sovereignty and non-interference, wary of setting international precedents that could one day be used against its own interests, especially regarding sensitive issues like Taiwan or Hong Kong. By opposing US strikes in Iran, China is not just protecting its energy and economic interests, but also sending a clear message about its core values and red lines. Ultimately, China's stance is about much more than oil. It's about energy security, strategic influence, and shaping a world order that reflects its own vision and priorities for the future. The current crisis is a major test of China's ability to shape global events, protect its interests, and assert itself as a key player on the world stage. The stakes for Beijing are high, and every decision now could have lasting consequences for China's role in the world. The US strikes and China's condemnation are shaking the Middle East. Iran's government is unified in defiance, promising a crushing response, possibly through proxy attacks. US allies like Saudi Arabia may quietly support the strikes but fear being drawn into war. China is positioning itself as a partner for peace and economic growth, appealing to Arab nations wary of US intervention. The crisis could push the region closer to China and away from exclusive reliance on the US. If Iran withdraws from the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, a nuclear arms race could follow. The risk of a nuclear-armed Middle East is now very real. This crisis is a turning point in global power dynamics. China's condemnation signals that the US can no longer act without challenge. The world is divided. US allies are uneasy, while many in the global South side with China's call for sovereignty. The United Nations faces gridlock, with China and Russia likely to block US moves. International law and institutions are under strain. The clash over Iran is a clash of worldviews. US interventionism versus China's emphasis on sovereignty. The outcome will shape the future of global governance. The world is watching to see who will lead. The strikes and China's reaction are redrawing alliances. Iran, China and Russia are moving closer, united against US dominance. Expect more military and intelligence cooperation among them. US ties with Europe are strained. Some allies support, others criticize the strikes. In the Middle East, Gulf states are hedging, relying on US security but deepening economic ties with China. Neutral countries like India face tough choices, pressured by both sides. The space for non-alignment is shrinking as the world polarizes. The era of easy neutrality may be ending. The crisis is forcing nations to pick sides, or at least lean. The global order is becoming more complex and contested. The world stands at a crossroads. Will this crisis escalate into full-scale war, or can diplomacy prevail? Iran's next move is critical. Direct retaliation could trigger devastating conflict. Indirect responses may lead to prolonged instability. There's still a chance for dialogue, with China and Europe pushing for restraint. Emergency UN meetings may help, but divisions run deep. This is a watershed moment for global politics, exposing the US-China rivalry. The fallout will affect everything from oil prices to refugee flows. The world is interconnected. A fire in one region threatens all. The choices made now will set the course for years to come. The world is watching, hoping for wisdom and restraint.